Okay, we are live 3 seconds in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's our favorite time of the week. Andrew Hoekstra, Tyler Bedhauser. How is everybody today? Let's start with that, and then if you're in the audience, tell us where you're from, and then we'll call you out in the show, and then hopefully today is going to be really, really fun. Maybe Tyler and Andrew, give us a snapshot of kind of the super secret stuff we're going to, well, not super secret, but the stuff we've learned, the aha moments that we're going to give to our audience today. So, so Tyler, let's start with you. How are things going, and what are some great hints, tips, and tricks that we're going to show today for the audience?
So I'm going pretty good. I was able to work in the last 2 weeks, amidst other projects, on how you might be able to predict sales leads closing. So I was able to train a couple models up, and I think it's really powerful to show how simple training up a model is and interpreting the results. So I think that would be neat to go over if we have time today. And then I think we're also going to look at various charting and how it can be done versus Python versus Power BI and things like that. So yeah, hopefully we can go over that today.
Oh yeah, that's cool. So yeah, funnel charts are one of my favorites. Add a lot of value. And then we're continuing from last week. We did some sales funnel charts, and then like you said, Tyler, we were like, ooh, we should do some predictive analytics, like see what this lead, what's the chance of it landing, right? Or give it a kind of a quality rating. And I've always been interested in that stuff. And Tyler, you got some success running that this week, so that's gonna be cool. And yeah, we have Ray Bennett from the UK. Thanks for chiming in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, and then Andrew. So we got some good stuff from Andrew too. So what are you working on, and what are we gonna share today?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited for us to get to the part about velocity through the sales funnel, because I think a lot of times when we talk sales funnel, we think about how do we add as many leads as we can to the beginning of the funnel, but there's so many other ways to convert that stuff to revenue. So I'm really excited to take a look at what we're doing on that. And then I'm not sure if we'll get to it, but another charting example that business leaders often love to look at is cash flow charts. And so I will occasionally use Python to generate those charts, especially when you don't have a complete system where all the information's entered into a database and you just have a bunch of Excel files or other comma separated values files that are spread across your directories. How do you pull those all together into Python and display them in a way that actually starts making sense instead of clicking around between a bunch of files? So yeah, got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Oh man. And so we'll try to limit it at an hour. You know how this goes. And then we'll probably carry some of this over. We're doing something different. Before we just did one series of shows, but now because of Tyler, he's like, let's do real data. Let's do an example. And now every show we're like building on each one. Like Andrew said, we're like sales leads. Ooh, let's take it another step. Let's take it another step. Or we got a bunch of data. How do we pull that together in Python? I know how to do it in Power BI, but in Python, that's news to me. So this is going to be, I'm going to learn something, and hopefully we'll share a lot of stuff with the audience. And Ray from the UK, if you have any questions throughout this, even for our next show, we'll recognize it and we'll try to incorporate it into the next show. So give us some feedback. And then what I want to show too a little bit is a little more about DAX Studio and filter context, because that has always boggled my mind with Power BI, how to decrement time and then bring that into the same row, because it works different than Excel. In Excel, you know exactly what cell you're in, what row you're in. But with filter context, it's kind of convoluted because you're going into another lookup table or another dimension, decrementing it there, and letting that flow back into your data table, which, it's been a while since I've started Power BI, and I'm still learning about this. So hopefully I share some tools today. And then the other question that comes up a lot is Azure. So we're going to start with that. Azure and AWS, we're going to start with a big bang today, because a lot of people, when I posted this to LinkedIn, connecting Power BI to Azure resources is one of the top questions. And Andrew and I were talking after the last show, and Azure, what is Azure? What does it mean? And then when you sign up for an account and you jump into Azure,
it's overwhelming.
You're like, what is it, right? And so I took a couple screenshots today. So I went into the Azure Marketplace, and if you look at databases, right, Azure SQL Managed, SQL Database, Azure Cosmos DB, you have all these options. And then Andrew, you were just showing me, that the dashboard, and I have one of these too. You start making each of these resources. Let's say you have a couple of SQL databases, maybe a machine learning module, maybe some Databricks, and then it just gives you a list, right? And it's this list of like 30 things that you're like, where do I go? What do I do? I mean, these are just some of the featured databases and some of the featured, AI machine learning modules. And it's really, really overwhelming. So, Andrew and I were talking, maybe we can do something, if there's questions from the audience, we can take maybe one section of Azure and try to do like a demo or a video, kind of show you how we walk through it and learn this, because I mean, if you're thrown into this, it's overwhelming, right? Maybe
it's import some Kaggle data into a database and then visualize it, or grab in some data from a public API or something. There's a number of things I think we could go through as a demo that people would say, yes, that's exactly what I need to do. So
yep. And then let's talk a little bit before we jump into the examples of sales funnels. So Andrew, you've worked quite a bit with AWS and AWS Lambda, and it's been a while, and I'm not as familiar. So for a beginner, how do you get started? Is there a free tier? Is AWS kind of the same thing? It's cloud and there's multiple resources in it, or how
when you log into AWS, you get a view much like what we see here on Azure. What I've found in my own personal projects and running my own sort of automation stuff, I found AWS's offerings to be at least a little bit easier and definitely cheaper to engage with, because their free tier level, I forget if it's like 100,000 or like 1 million Lambda function calls, which a Lambda function call, you can think of it like an automation, right? You can hit it, like you can send information up to the cloud like an API and have it perform actions for you without you having to worry about servers and things of that nature. So I run all my personal animations off of that, and there's no way I get up to how much they give you under the free tier. So it's basically free automation compute up in the cloud is what I use it for. So if you're paying for things like if this, then that, or Zapier, with a little bit of coding, you can pretty much make that all yourself for free.
Wow. And that's the AWS, and that's called the Lambda. So that's kind of
their Lambda functions.
Resource. And that just ties together and integrates different cloud resources, right?
Yeah, and Azure's got that too. I think they call theirs Azure Functions. So each of these cloud offerings have that. I've just always found AWS is a little bit easier to integrate with and a much more generous free tier.
Yeah. And then just curious, so Tyler and Andrew, so for your backends and stuff, do you use any AWS, or are you primarily using SQL servers on-prem? Or what kind of backends are you using, and are you using any cloud services?
So for work, we use AWS. We have S3 buckets basically with all of our data in it, and then we use Databricks to actually crunch it with PySpark and things like that. Like my personal projects, I don't have anything big enough to really warrant using AWS or Azure, but I did find a cool little app called Optumi that basically will set up cloud services for you. And it's not nearly as complicated as getting some sort of AWS or Azure instance going. It does it all for you. It budgets it, all that kind of stuff. And on the few little projects had, it's pretty useful to be able to spool up something in the cloud really quick and then leverage the cloud computing in order to take some of the load off of your personal computer, and things run much faster. So it just kind of depends on the project, but most of my stuff has been with AWS and Databricks.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'd say my clients have been even mix between either AWS or Azure. There's been one that used Google Cloud just a little bit, but the vast majority are AWS or Azure. So now, right now, I'm mostly in Azure with my clients, and they're pretty much all using this Azure SQL managed instance that you see at the top of the screen up there. So yeah, it's just a lot of leveraging their SQL instance, and then I write a bunch of Python scripts to do ETL, extract, transform, load operations before sending it on to their machine learning workspace to do some model training and inference.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And then, for me, a lot of people still use Excel. So I actually have a bunch of people that load into Power BI in Excel. But on my own, I just experiment with Azure SQL database. But that's what I also found the other day was there was a serverless where it spins up on demand. So it doesn't, so you don't have to shut it off, and it doesn't take as much of. So for testing and development purposes, it was awesome. Now, to spin it up, it takes a little bit longer time, but if you don't want to get up to your Azure credits, because this is how Azure works. You pick one of these, and then every month you get this bill that says, oh, you used up this many hours of credit on this server and this server and this server. And that's so beautiful about serverless is it only hits those credits if you spin it up and use it. So when I start up a Power BI report and it hits it, I can see there's a graph inside of this dashboard. I log into Azure. It's like, oh, you hit it a couple times and this many dollars against your credits. And then, once you're done, it goes away and it starts up again. So I thought
it's like trading off cost with latency, right? Like you said, you have to wait a little bit for it to spin up, but saving the cost makes that worth it, especially if you're just doing some exploration.
Yeah. It was, that's all I was doing. And then for if I go into production, I can move it into a database, a SQL. So it was really cool and neat things. And that's the beauty of Azure too, is spin up. Before, if you wanted to start or set up a SQL database, you had to set up a server, you had to do all this stuff. Here it's like on demand. You go in and minutes later it's up and running and you're connected to it and loading data. So that's, there's a lot of benefits to cloud services, and I wanted to start with that because it's a big bang for me. But it there's a learning curve. When you get in, you get dropped into this and you're like, now what is this?
Yeah.
So, Ray and Ray was saying SharePoint and Excel mainly is what he's using. So Ray, I've used SharePoint lists a lot in the last company I was with, because they were a SharePoint company for their intranet, and that was easy to connect to Power BI, and it gave it some data integrity. Excel, oh my gosh, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because as you probably know, anybody can go in and manipulate any data and change anything at any time. And then you look at your report a couple days later and you're like, wow, everything is been changed and you have no traceability to that change or more difficult.
So that's funny that Ray mentioned that, because I worked on a couple projects where most of the company ran databases on SharePoint. It was like database light. It was very strange. I've never, it was kind of cool because I could integrate a lot of them with Access and some other small local database tools, but it was cool. All right. The business was able to get the work they needed to get done. But I had not seen SharePoint used in that manner before. Yeah.
No, it's a lot of broken reports. Ray is just saying, a lot of broken reports. Right. Things change. And I've actually worked at some places where email is kind of it's interesting. You tag email.
Really? How did they change that?
You tag. It's like I forget what the type of unstructured data, but then they structure it by putting in the subject, maybe some
Yep.
tags in the subject, and then you can search through that way, right? And then there's traceability and stuff. So it's a fascinating, it takes a lot of organization to do it that way, but it is fascinating. So Ray, great points. I appreciate those comments because we've been there. We've seen that, where unstructured data and can throw off your report. So I'm going to jump to, let's see if I can. So I'm going to go into PowerPoint mode. Let's jump into sales and marketing funnels. So we've 15 minutes. We just got off of the Azure and AWS train. And then I'm going to start off with sales and marketing funnels. And then Tyler and Andrew, I think you guys have an example of using predictions. And maybe, did you use AutoML or what did you use to kind of get the?
So I used two different models. I used tree-based decision tree models, and then support vector classifiers. So
okay.
I was pretty proud of myself.
Yeah, well, I have some learning to do from you today. So we'll get to that in a second. So last week, oh my gosh, it's getting hidden by some of this stuff, but let me move it. So what I did is we started this funnel, form fill, email 1, email 2, class, and class 2. And this is your typical sales funnel of all the leads that you've generated that have filled up form. And then I have kind of a conversion. So this is a fake data set. But the problem was when I went to select current phase, that gave me where everything was. And I remember last week I clicked on that and it showed a funnel because it would take, for example, email 2 and put it at the top, right? But that wasn't the journey that the customer was going through because they did the form fill first, email 1 second, email 2 third. So what I had to do is I created a table, a lookup table, and tied it into my data table here. So this is kind of the view of this group by up here. It's got a sort number in it. So then you can sort, form fill is by number 1, email is number 2, et cetera. And then I clicked on this current phase, and then that just showed me where everybody was right now today. So, I could look at this. One of the analysis I did was, okay, I don't have enough people in the pipeline at the first stage. I brought them here, but we're going to have an issue soon where these people funnel through. And then I'm not going to have any leads coming into the top of the funnel. So. You
sure feel busy right now, but you won't be soon.
So anyways, that's, this is the table. Oh, I'm going to have to move everything out of the way. So this is the table I built, and I added an index. And this is really cool because in Power BI and Power Query, I'm harvesting these from the data table. So I did a duplicate query. Then I did a remove duplicates. So it's kind of like the value function we did last week, except it creates, just the distinct values. I think you called it unique, right, Andrew?
There's distinct in SQL. There's unique in the Python pandas stuff. Everybody's got their term for it.
Yeah. So I did this. I removed duplicates, did a duplicate query, and then I added an index, and then I put my sort in here, which is kind of a redundant with the funnel index, but I put the sort, and then once I did that, you could sort your funnel by the sequence and the steps and really see what's going on. So this was a good exercise, and this is a trick I learned is, when you want to sort stuff, you create a second table with a sort index, and then you do sort by, and it pulls everything in order. So
could you do that with calculations in Power BI too? Because I know I had a similar issue in Tableau this week when I was working on a dashboard for work. And for whatever reason, with blended data in Tableau, you don't get the same native sorting functions that exist within it. So the neat thing is you can create a calculation that you can then make like a discrete measure and then just sort on that, and it will allow you to sort across the data set, which I thought was pretty cool. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, no, I'm not as familiar with Tableau, but let's maybe we can do a demo of something quick in Tableau next time. Because
I just was mentioning because I think it's interesting the different ways you can do the same thing in different tools.
Yeah, and I know one of our audience members last time was just like, "Whoa, this is a really cool show," because we come from 3 different. You've got the Tableau, I've got the Power BI, and Andrew's got the Jupyter and Python and everything, and there's different ways to do it. All the same thing, just different words and stuff. So I'm gonna write that down, and maybe we can do a demo of Tableau.
Now we can look at it.
One of the most searched queries I've seen is what's the difference between Tableau and Power BI. So that would be interesting next time to do that. And if there's any audience members out there that have comments or have seen it in Tableau, let us know. So Andrew, anything else? And then Tyler, if you want to bring up your share of the you did the predictive or the qualitative leads ranking, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, not really ranking, but yeah, we can go over that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that, Tyler.
Yeah.
Oh boy, on the spot.
Yeah. You're on the spot right now.
If you find a bug, don't you dare say anything. You can let me know after.
That's part of the beauty of live shows, and I think that's why people watch us. Is like maybe I can catch them, or I think I called it stump the presenter or something. Let's play a game. Let's see if we can find the bug. All right, we're gonna play a game. Scary? Tyler's gonna post something, and we're gonna see if we can find the bug.
That is one of the most nerve-wracking things, is coding live in front of somebody, because you get to see the whole actual coding process. I can't tell you how many times, like when you've delivered code and it's like you wrote 10 lines of code. That took you how long? And you're like, well, I actually rewrote these 10 lines of code about 100 times.
Yeah, so... and spent 4 hours on Stack Overflow.
Well, do you remember last time, Andrew, you asked me, I was doing DAX Studio, and you were like, hey, can you do this or something?
Oh, and I asked that question.
Yeah, was it you, Tyler? Oh, yeah, I had a head rush. I got so nervous. I was like, I'm going to mess up for sure.
I'm not inviting him back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, cool. So it's a little hard to see, but...
is it? Here, let me...
Yeah, we'll probably get the gist of it.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better.
There we go. All right.
Okay. So my first attempt at this was to just see if I could, at the very basic level, predict predict whether or not one of the leads would close at all. So I wanted in the next step to get into, could you predict how long a particular lead was going to take to close? Or not, obviously. So the first step was to just figure out if I could predict whether or not the leads would close at all. But
is this Kaggle data?
Yeah, this is the OList data.
Okay.
I had to do a bunch of, so when I combined the 2 data sets, right, there was a ton of nulls because the qualified leads data set didn't have a lot of the feature data that existed with the actual closed leads data set. So I had to do a bunch of imputation in order to make it work properly. We don't necessarily have to go over that now, but so with just a few lines of code.
So let me just, so you use the OList data, which is from Kaggle. So I'm just gonna reiterate for the audience members. So we went to Kaggle, which has a bunch of data that people all over the world have posted of real, actual data sets. And we found one with leads, sales funnel leads, and it had 2 tables. It had qualified leads, and then it had a closed leads. And the closed ones, I think you were saying, only had the close and the close date. So there was a bunch that weren't tagged with, because you had all these leads in the lead table, the yellow one there on the left, and then you had these closed ones, but there were a bunch that weren't connected to anything, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Basically. Yeah. And so in order to make this work, I had to kind of figure out how to reliably fake it in order to build out a model. But the concepts are still reliable, I think. So so after I did all of that data wrangling and engineering, I wanted to work first with the support vector classifiers. So one of the cool things I learned in the classes I've taken is this grid search. So you can input a bunch of parameters for a given model and then iterate over them, a bunch of times. So you can essentially train for the best parameters that you can, and then whatever those best parameters are, in this case, your C is 0.1 and your kernel type is linear. It's pretty simple to just go model equals C. You put in the kernel type and your C value. You simply train, or you fit it to the training data. You build out your predictions, and within just a couple lines of code, you can get an idea of how accurate you actually are. And so the biggest problem with this data set is the classes are so imbalanced, right? So you have a ton of basically leads that didn't close, right? And then you have actual true values that did close, and those happen to be quite the minority. So we had obviously a pretty easy time predicting closed ones, but I'm actually surprised how accurately we could predict the leads that did close, which I think I could fix in future versions of this. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm really glad you're showing this chart, because a lot of times when companies start working with machine learning, the metric of interest is always accuracy instead of what you have here, which includes precision, recall, and then the combination of those two in one way, which is the F1 score.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons why I bring that up is because if you have really imbalanced data sets like this, like say you have a sales funnel where you get 10,000 people coming through because you just get a bunch of leads from Facebook or something, but only a couple of them actually end up converting, you can get to a 99.5% accuracy score by the classifier that says every time, no matter what data you give it, it's not going to close.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be right most of the time.
Right,
and so
exactly.
It's a highly accurate classifier, but as you can see here, there's different ways to break down that accuracy metric so you can get real insights. So I'm really glad you're showing this table, because that's missed by a lot of people getting their start in machine learning.
Yeah.
And what I thought was so interesting was that yes, I had a 95% accuracy rate, but it wouldn't have been very useful because,
Right.
you're only, well, I say you're only able to accurately predict the close once 72% of the time. But that's actually still way better than probably most humans could predict, right? So I think that was the other point the other rationalization I had was, well, 72% is not that bad, given how imbalanced the data set was. And it's just a matter of how do you, there are some hyperparameters, right, that we could implement, or some methodologies that we can employ to make this more accurate, which I hope to do in the future as I continue this. But yeah, just a few lines of code and you can be off to the races. Now, granted, you have to have a little bit of the baseline knowledge to know what you're looking at, but I thought that was pretty cool.
What are the parameters that predict if something is going to close or not?
Yeah, what did you train it on? What features?
So that's the first part of the code, right? You went through and there were a few columns or parameters that you found to be the best predictors of closing, and then so where do you see that in this?
In line 91 here. So I chose landing page ID, the origin, the sales development rep, the sales rep, the business segment, lead type, lead behavior profile, so all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I had to basically, because all of these are categorical variables, you then have to, what I found, one-hot encode them so that you can basically turn everything into an integer so the model can actually process it, right? Because there are very few models, at least that I know of that can actually process categorical variables easily, right? So that was probably the first step that I really had to get over. And so I found that one-hot encoding tends to work at least for this implementation anyway.
Yeah. So what are the key parameters? Is that what you're looking at right now? Or
Yep.
2008 true? So some combination of those four in that fourth row, or what, if you were going to talk to a business leader, these are the categories you got to focus on, because if you do this, you're going to close, we predict you're going to close 70% with this set of parameters.
Yeah, I would just say these are the variables that you work with.
Yeah. I think, Charles, what you're getting at is a common question I hear a lot in the machine learning. So it's like, yeah, you gave it, say, I don't know what the count is there, but 20 input features. Right. Which ones are the most important, right? Like, I can't hold 20 in my brain. I want to look at like 3 features that I can have a gut feel and just be able to know what I need to work on to improve. So, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get to that. There's explainable AI models. So decision trees are one of those that you can kind of decompose into feature importance. And I think that's what you're doing here a little bit, right? Like, is looking at the importance of each feature. And then there's also recursive feature elimination, where you train up a whole series of different models and you just start dropping out features and checking its performance. And the ones that you drop and then the performance drops, well, that's a pretty important feature.
Right, exactly.
So there's a bunch of different techniques for getting to those kinds of answers.
So that hasn't been done yet. That's the next step potentially on this.
Yeah, for whatever reason this is broken. So, but yeah, I mean, there's lots of different functions that you can use in order to determine those feature importances. And basically, whatever features have a 0 importance level, I could probably just drop off. But the model wouldn't change from a accuracy or precision perspective, because you're only using the inputs that make a difference anyways. So all this one-hot encoding does is it takes all of the categories within a given dimension. So for example, landing page ID, and it flows it out horizontally, and it gives a 1 or a 0 for a given record. And that determines, okay, did this record have this landing page ID? Yes or no? And that's basically it.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's why you get out of 20 features, 1,300. I mean, it took a while to train. So yeah, probably the next step would be determining which features have the most importance, narrow that down to make the model perform better. And then I was going to look at doing things like gradient boosting and oversampling and stuff like that. So maybe you can get your very simple model, more easily tuned to predicting on this data set. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And the confusion matrix also helps kind of visualize how accurate you are across your model, which is pretty neat as well. So yeah, I thought that was pretty neat the last couple of weeks to work on.
Yeah, it sounds good. And then maybe next time we can take this a little bit further and pick the attributes, because I think that's going to be a common for an end user, for example, that hires you. They're like, hey, I've got all this data. Tell me what I need to do or what I need to change or which landing page to use so that I get my close rate, and stop focusing on these landing pages because they don't work or something, I think what you're getting at too is there's probably a combination of things. This landing page plus this,
exactly.
This sequence, this email sequence, this combination would really boost you. And if we could kind of wrap that, in the next one, I think that'd be awesome too. And Optumi, I know you were talking about that, so maybe we can go back a little bit to the basics of that at the next show too. But this.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is a really cool extension. I really like this for Jupyter Lab.
Cool. All right, and Ray had to drop off on YouTube, but Ray, if you have some questions, post them. we'll try to get to them on the next show too. So I'm gonna jump back to, let's see here. So I've got, I think I showed you this one. So I use Concatenatex again. So this, I think we talked about last time was, I was having an issue with, if you have a client and you have it in a data set and you just wanted to see all the different dates that client made an event on, I used the Concatenatex function, and that was kind of cool because I can kind of visually see the intervals between each step he takes in the funnel, he or she, right? So 2.2, 2.10, 2.20, 2.27. So this was my first step at, let's just show me all the dates that each client took and how many steps they took through. So that got me thinking, because I think, Andrew, you were like, well, let's take an average at each time, at each step, between email 2 and the step before that. How long did it take? So what I had to do is I wrote this function down here where I use calculate and then Concatenatex again to pull that date out of there. But I use this really interesting filter function, and maybe you guys can talk about, in Python or any other tool or Tableau. But I had a data table, but then I had to go up into the funnel step lookup table, and then I had to do math on that table where I decremented by 1, and you can see the -1 down here.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the current filter context, which is the step number, I -1, and then I filtered that table and brought it back down. And calculate takes that new filter context, the -1, and then pulls the last step and the last date down into your table. So this actually took me an hour to figure out, because in my head, this was so abstract, right? Because I was changing the filter context on a certain table. And I think to make it simple for the audience, what I had to do was, in Excel, and maybe I talk about Excel, is in Excel, you know what row you are, and you use VLOOKUP to look at another table and match up that row. But if you need to change a time, you have to kind of take that reference cell and say -1 row and pull the data from that prior row down into that cell. But in Power BI, it's all in kind of these dimensions, and you have to go into this other dimension table, subtract 1, and then bring it back down in your table, right? So it's really abstract way to think about it, but this function right here was magical, because you can see here, for each row, for each client, I had email step 2, and then the prior step was 6.10. The current step is 6.15. So now I can find the delta between email 1, which occurred on 6.10, and email 2, which is 6.15. And this led to, did you guys already discuss how to sell your data services? Not yet, Daryl. That comes at the end of the show, and that's going to be big stuff. I'm holding the best. So good timing on your part. But this was so cool, because now what Andrew was saying was each step, you can now analyze the average time it takes to complete, to close out or take somebody through the first step to the second step, right? And then
what's your funnel velocity, right?
Yeah, that's a good term for it. Funnel velocity.
Mine's 0.
Yeah.
I don't need a fancy formula to know that.
Yeah.
Well, 0 would be if you're averaging 0 days between each step, that'd be blazing fast, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, so it's like 365 then.
Oh, okay.
Days.
We're gonna fix that. So we're gonna fix that for you, Tyler. And Daryl, we'll talk about this too. But yeah, this was mind blowing, because I was shifting time and then bringing it all into the same table, and then you could do differences and averages and see each step and bring that into the filter context. So I just wanted to show that real quick, because it was really, really interesting stuff. And on the next video, I'll take this a step further and start doing the average for each step. So right now you can see if there's a step missing, if the prior step wasn't taken. you have a huge date gap. So I need to clean those out, and then I can start taking averages between everything. So that's my next step. And Tyler, if you have any tips on that, I'm up for it. So
So that function's kind of like doing a subquery then with SQL, right? Because you're joining that table against itself. I don't know. I just was thinking conceptually about how I would do that in SQL. I don't know if there's a good way to do that in SQL. I'll have to research that.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that would be a good one for next time, maybe even too, is to do it in SQL and kind of see if we can duplicate this. Yeah, so I'll send you this after the show. But yeah, I use Calculate. Calculate's a fascinating function because it can eliminate a filter context. So you can see this all right here.
Interesting.
It's ignore whatever's coming in for funnel step lookup. So that's my sorting of the funnel steps. And I was like, and then take the max funnel step that's in this for this current client and subtract 1 from it and use that instead to pick your data.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, so it's very powerful because it can shift time for any context you want, and it can remove with this all function, but it's also the most abstract and confusing part of Power BI. So, but very powerful stuff. So, and then I just want to show this real quick, and we'll get to the Daryl's stuff too because we're at 41 minutes. But this is one thing that I thought was super useful, and it's when you start combining data sets within Power BI. So as an example, this is, if you were to pull from your ERP or MRP your current workload over the next, let's say, 12 months, and you can see the gap here in August, September timeframe, and then let's say you connect it to your Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using. Oops. So I got to move this one out of the way. And then you select, for example, you find so you see that gap, and then in the dark blue, I have if we land this particular project and I use the filter to turn it on, if we land it, we'll fill that gap and load up our capacity. So this is stuff I've been working on because it's super powerful because it's connecting 2 databases. It's got your operations, you're looking at your gaps, and then you're looking at your CRM data and blending the 2. And then you can plan your workload, because then I think, Andrew, you talked about this. You've got sales team going out and just selling, right? And then, they could be selling for February, and this thing could be already loaded up and you don't have enough capacity.
Right.
So now you can start doing strategic planning and saying, you know what, this project, we can't handle this here. That's going to be too much overtime. Let's shift it out a little bit and work with the client and see if we can land it in where the gaps are, or even this one, I'd shift it out a month. So it's over these last 3 months instead. So stuff like that you can do.
That's why the time to close, I think, is a really cool use case for the machine learning, was that it's not only resource planning, but it's also kind of revenue planning, I guess, right? Because you know when those sales leads will close and about how much they're worth.
Yeah,
it might be pretty useful to understand, when that money is going to come in, and that goes into your resource planning.
Yeah,
there's so many things, and then you're working on the the predictive part. Is like, if we improve our landing pages, we'll get more of these leads, and then you can start. Yeah, we can time shift some of these to fill the gaps, and we'll have more leads coming in. And then so this is super powerful once you combine all these aspects across your whole company and connect them together. Because I think that's a big thing, communication from sales to operations. I think, Andrew, you alluded to this last time, is you got to connect all the pieces to make sure your production is loaded properly, right? So and just to play around, I just created a fake data set, and I'm going to show the audience this. Just add a month, a project number, kind of hours per month, and then the key was, when you shape your data set, a lead type. So this is closed and in production, and then I just had one project in to simulate this. But this is basically your CRM data, and then the C's are your ERP operations data, and then all you need is a date table, and then you've got a working table like this. Now, don't be fooled. This is an easy data set. Data never comes in between.
Yeah, right.
This is after maybe the bulk of the work of a data
Right, yeah.
project, right? The fun part of it.
Yeah,
We're just showing the tip of the iceberg.
yeah. So let's jump in. We're at 45 minutes. I'm going to show you one last thing before we go into the sales leads. I know Daryl's waiting for that, but I use DAX Studio, and what was really fascinating about DAX Studio is there's a function in there called define filter dump measures, all tables. And then it generates this code right here. And I'm not going to go into the code, but it auto generates this code, right? And what's really fascinating is you can add this code into Power BI, and then, I got to move everything out of the way here. So, so I'm real careful. Tyler, we had talked about this on live shows.
Yeah.
You don't want to show something inadvertently. So I'm trying to do everything in PowerPoint. But what's really fascinating about DAX Studio is once you do this and you put it in a measure and you put it in your tooltip, you can hover over each bar and it will tell you all the different filter contexts that are feeding that bar.
Oh, sweet.
Right. So then this feeds into
Really neat.
the other thing I was doing was when you look at this, you can see, the filter context can come from like 3 or 4 different areas, but you can see what the filter context is. And then you can use that calculate function to alter some of these. So for example, this is the one I manipulated was funnel step lookup. So I said I wanted to see -1. So, step 0. So I used this to see what filter context was. And then I used this number to decrement by 1. So this is a really, really powerful tool in DAX Studio that a lot of people don't know about. So I wanted to show the audience member this, but define filter dump, and then you throw it into your tooltip to see what the filter context is. All right, so Daryl, here we go. We're getting to how to sell, your services, data services, right? And Tyler, Andrew, and I have all started our own businesses because we saw the power of data. But it was scary at first. I think Tyler, you could talk to this. Selling is scary, right? Especially data.
Yeah.
Data is so new. A lot of people, have questions about it. There's a trust of data is an important issue, concern for a lot of people. Data security. So maybe tips and tricks on what best practices have worked for you. And I'm gonna, when you guys are done, I'll talk a little bit about my sales funnel and what I'm using too to improve sales for data. So Tyler, you want to kick us off with kind of the tips and tricks for anybody watching?
So I think for me, while it hasn't been quite successful yet, is actually putting together a portfolio and putting yourself out there and showing how you can process a problem from start to finish. I think that's really what I want to use. What I wanted to use the OList data for was really showing how you can digest a problem, understand a process, and propose a solution, right? And whether or not that solution is exactly right doesn't really matter. But it's at the very least something that you bring to the table and say, hey, look, here's how I can help solve a problem. And, here's where we think the value lies in it. So I think to me, blogging has been somewhat therapeutic in kind of the selling space because it's my way of being able to best communicate how I think and how I bring value and the types of technologies I can bring to the table. So for me, I think that's probably the biggest tip is start really documenting your work in a website or a blog or however you want to do it, or in a LinkedIn live stream.
Yeah. The live stream I think is super powerful. So I just have a quick story about that is, I just met with, so we got a note from Daryl, with potential first client through Upwork. This is helpful.
All right.
Awesome. So
good for you.
Yeah. So, on Daryl, if you're into it, so video is not for everybody. I know I still get scared when I get on video, but video has been a blessing in disguise for me, because I remember getting on Avi Singh's show, and if you can get on a show that somebody else has a large audience with, it does amazing things for you, because he pulled me onto the show, and I was deathly afraid of going on the show. I think I didn't sleep the night before, and I told my wife, I need to cancel this because I'm too stressed out. And she's like, yeah, can you cancel? Can you email him and ask him if you can cancel? And I was like, I think it's too late. So I went on the show anyways, right? And here's the crazy thing that happened. I finished the show. It was an hour long. And for the next 4 to 5 days, I fielded LinkedIn connections from all over the world, right? And it was just, I was just talking and being me, and, just chatting about data. But people saw the passion, and they saw my interest, and they wanted to connect with me, right? And that was an eye-opening experience in that, I had this great skill that I could offer to the world, but it made me realize if nobody knows about it, nobody's going to buy it, right? So this video opened up the world to my skill set, and that's why, I do this every bi-weekly now with you guys. Is if we don't talk about it, we don't tell stories about what we do, nobody will know. And I remember one time I sat in a meeting, and my title was business intelligence manager, and somebody asked me, it's like, what do you do all day? So this is an awesome show, because we get to showcase our work, what we do every single day. And it's, like your stuff that you were just showing, Tyler, I do it a different way than you do it. Andrew does it in a different way, but this is, a great way to showcase. So, and Daryl's saying I'm Tableau, Power BI, MicroStrategy developer. Awesome. All right.
Oh, MicroStrategy. I haven't seen that one. I mean, I knew of it. I just haven't worked with it before.
Yep. So Andrew, do you have any tips for sales in terms of, things you've learned over the past, year now with your business, but you, interestingly, have been doing this for 4 or 5 years with Deos Ballet with your wife. So just, are there any things you're transferring from Deos to here, to your data business?
Yeah, I mean, I often will get the question, what's a data person doing with ballet, professional ballet? And to be clear, I don't dance. But there's a surprising amount of overlap in success of both of those businesses. And a lot of it is what Charles is talking about. And I think Tyler mentioned it too. You got to show up and be present, right? So if you're just working in your own space, doing your own thing, and not sharing your work with the world on different platforms, nobody's going to know about what you do and how to connect with you. So that's one of the reasons why we do this show. And after I started doing that for the data side of my business, Point Vector, I focused in on one channel, which was LinkedIn. And so far, 100% of my machine learning business has come in through connections on LinkedIn who've seen a video or a post or something that I did where I'm just describing about what I work on. You get direct messages coming in saying, hey, this sounded familiar, but I actually have this problem over here. Can you help me with that? And one of the things that I had to overcome when I was starting this whole process is I have a natural draw to, some people call it shiny object syndrome, right? Where it's like all the really cool, new, complicated technologies I love reading research papers on. I love going through and playing around with them. But the reality is so many businesses need just the basic stuff. Yeah. And it's not like crazy computer vision, help me identify and count people and all that type of stuff. It's really a lot of business process stuff. How do I forecast my sales? How do I forecast my workload? How do I go through and find anomalies in my business data? Because a lot of this is just trying to help people ask better questions, more so than giving them direct insights of here are the specific actions to take. They all want the specific actions to take, and you'll get there, but the first part of all this stuff, especially on the start of projects, is to ask a lot of really good clarifying questions to really understand what are they trying to solve. Because just going through that process and showing the preliminary results towards the answer of those questions are going to bring up even more important questions that helps you demonstrate value as you go along.
Right, because the tech doesn't solve the problem always, right? Like it's how does it does, but it doesn't, right? It always goes back to how you're going to use it as a tool to actually fix the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Nobody buys a tool. Yeah, they buy your solution to the problem. And Andrew, that's a fascinating thing, asking the right questions, because there's a language too to data analytics, and some, there's people that don't communicate the way you do, right? So that's a big thing for me to learn. Is sometimes I talk in calculate and filter functions and iterator functions, and people like, I don't understand that. I just want the result. I just want, the time savings or the money savings or just the solution to this problem. So I have to reframe and understand how to fit it into my context and my world, and communicate properly back and forth too. Because there's been frustrations too at times when I'm speaking this language and I was like, I'm taking you to a data model that will solve this issue. But if I don't communicate it well enough, there's kind of a friction, right? It's like, I need a solution to my problem, but you're speaking about all this other stuff that I don't understand. So how do we get to that solution? So that's been a huge learning curve for me, is how to communicate and explain, and translate kind of between the business world and the Power BI, the stuff that I live in every day. So yeah, Daryl.
One of the other questions that I love asking too is the why now question, right? A lot of companies will come to you and say, hey, we need to figure out how to do this. It's like, great. Why do you need to know how to do that now? Like, why can't you wait a year? Why didn't you do this a year ago? Or like, why is there this time pressure now that you're looking for somebody to solve this problem? Because a lot of times the real impetus or the real, insight behind what they're looking for comes from, where is this urgency or this new feeling of pressure coming from that you can use to figure out what they really actually want to solve instead of just what chart they want to see.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. Is understanding the why, the how, just the deeper questions. And, we were talking to this about, Tyler, a lot of times there's a underlying fear, and here's what's fascinating is I've been on so many sales calls, and a lot of times the client is just as afraid as I am of selling on that phone call. Yeah. Because, they don't want to work with me if I'm like lecturing them or I'm using all these words and get them confused, or if I make them feel like they don't know what they're doing. Right. So that's taken me, I have to speak and communicate in a way that alleviates a lot of fear. So that's a lot of times what selling data is it's a new area. A lot of people are scared, all these technical terms, converting it into something people can trust and speaking in a way that it's like, okay, you seem to know what you're talking about and you're able to communicate it to me, and making that person decide that they want to work with me because I'm willing to coach them and help them through this problem solving process has helped me so much. And I'm just going to put a plug in too, is I'm working on my own sales funnel now. And if anybody is on this, what I'm doing now is I'm creating a sales funnel by having a landing page. So my website now has a sign up for a LinkedIn class. So you sign up here, and I'm experimenting with Convertkit to send email campaigns out. So there's going to be a series of 5 emails. And if you're interested in seeing how I do this, join me, because I'm learning about all these things now. So sign up through this link. And then, so I'll take you through and I'll show you how to use Convertkit, how I created the landing page, how I use Convertkit to tag people and do an automated email sequence. So you can kind of see that whole process as I'm building it out. And then what I'm ending it with is a class. So my lead magnet is also a class. So I'm providing some free value in a class that I put on Thinkific. And then at the end of the emails, I hope to have a, like a one-on-one call or another class at a deeper level, right? So I'm taking people through this funnel and I'm experimenting with this, and it's, it's in the works. But if you sign up, you can kind of watch me go through this process too, in terms of developing a funnel. And then, I'm going to take this data and analyze it too. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But that's one of the questions I get a lot is, I think sales and marketing funnels is kind of new, right? Does Deos and do you guys use it? Or Tyler, have you thought about using a funnel for your?
We're starting to build it up for Deos Contemporary Ballet as we're growing in audience size and sophistication. So we're going to be using it for all of our social media advertising, to landing pages, to tracking conversion rates through all that type of stuff. So yeah, it's coming. It takes a while to build though.
Yeah. It's and then all these different tools and you got to integrate them. So that's why I was asking about Zapier the other day is, you got Thinkific, but then you got to get payments. So do you integrate with another tool to get payments? And then you got to, do the email campaign. So there's that. Then there's the WordPress and the landing pages. So there's that. So there's all these steps along the funnel. And I was just reading the other day, it's kind of a new concept because before you just put a landing page or a website.
Right.
But over the past 5 years, people are now doing a funnel with email campaigns, to lead to a lead magnet or something. So
I had thought about it. I just don't think there's enough business there yet to really invest the amount of time. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm hustling on the side, right? So this is something I have to kind of manage along with the other job. So I think I'll get there one day, but I hadn't really thought of how I would even set that up yet. I'm sure I'll rely on you guys.
That's a great point, Tyler, because I went through that where I was hustling on the side, and you don't have enough time in the day to. Sometimes you're like, holy cow, work and this. So you lose some sleep sometimes. So Daryl.
Well, and some of this goes to identifying like what your product ladder might be. Right. Because I think when people want to start freelancing in the data world, they think, okay, I need to be hired to work on a project for a couple of months. So you're looking at sales, hopefully each project in the thousands or 10,000s of dollars at a time. But what you're going to end up getting more use out of a funnel for, especially early on, is your sort of smaller content stuff. So do you have a niche guide for a particular industry using a particular tool and showing them, hey, here's how I stitched these 3 things together to help you visualize your sales funnel better. And instead of hiring me to do that, look, here's this, guide out there, maybe even for free, right? Or you put that on Facebook or LinkedIn advertisements or Twitter or whatever. And that's where you're going to get people clicking, linking, seeing your downloadable assets that you can then start conversations with, start upselling them into higher versions of Product Ladder until eventually you've got the trust that people start paying for the big bucks services.
Yeah. So Tyler, I was thinking you could take some of this sales funnel work that you're doing, do an email campaign, and then people sign up, and then you just say, look, this is what I've done with sales funnels, and this is how you can use what I've developed. Yeah. To
I hadn't thought about it that way.
Generate more leads and sales. And that's kind of, so my goal with this wasn't really the product at the end, but it was to build awareness around all the stuff that I do and how I analyze data. So that was the series of email campaigns. That's with classes. And it's really to build awareness and trust of, my work by telling that story over a series of emails. And then like Andrew said, LinkedIn is crazy powerful. So if anybody's in the audience listening, the direct messages, people, the likes and stuff aren't really what's valuable. What's so valuable is when they see you enough and they see your work and they trust you enough that they email and say, I've seen your work. I really like what you've done. And I think I trust you to solve all my problems. It becomes an inbound then you're not selling anymore because know you have the skills, they know you have the skills, and then you're off and running. The trust is already established, right? So that's inbound marketing is so powerful. And if there's anybody in the audience, you should really research and study this, because Andrew, I know the videos is another powerful part of inbound marketing, because when people hear you and they trust you and they connect with your values and they trust you, it's so much easier. I'm scared of selling too, but when it's inbound, it's so much easier because you already have a friend on the other side of the phone, right? So
and don't try to boil the ocean, right? You got to niche down. I was always afraid to find a very, very small niche in which I would make a landing page for or make a video on. I tried to cater a LinkedIn post to the widest audience because I was seeking, the widest audience to engage with it. But I found the most engagement and the most conversations come from when you really niche down that content. And you can experiment with a whole bunch of different niches, right? But don't be afraid to really pare down into, here's a specific industry chart type, and way of thinking about a problem, and really hone in on that for a week or so to see if you get any sort of interest, and then maybe go to something else and circle back if it didn't work, because the timing might just be off too. So it's a lot of experimentation.
That is great advice. And I know I was scared to niche down, like you said, but I did. And it made all the difference in the world because it made it a lot more fun for me. It made a lot more impact, and I could add more value to the end customer. So I got into renewables just because I'm passionate about, solar energy and it's like, energy for the sun, fascinating. And I studied that stuff. And now, I find that the people that also are passionate about that stuff, we get along really well. Their interests. So I'm like, these are my friends. And, and then this goes to Daryl. He was asking about pricing too. That's an interesting question, and I'm going to give my take, and then maybe so we're at an hour and 6 minutes. So this is probably the last question. But pricing comes up all the time. A lot of people ask about pricing. And I guess my advice is, look at what your salary is now, maybe in your corporate life. And, I think it's double, right, to get an hourly rate, and maybe start with that. Because people, what happens is people go on WeWork, Fiverr, and they look at other people that are in these commoditized markets. And, you look at that and you're like, wow, I'll never make any money. But if you tie together Andrew's point, if you niche down and specialize, the people that are generalists can't compete with you at that point because you have a specialized skill in a specialized market and you speak that language. And then when people find you, you can charge what you're worth, right? And make a living. And, you got to think about yourself too. You don't want to lower your price so that you can't make a living. But when you focus like that, like Andrew, that advice is so important. Focus yourself so that you can charge the higher rates and you can focus your study in that market and be of incredible value to your customers, right?
People don't want to hire a generalist consultant most of the time, unless they're like a small company with a lot of cash. But that's a niche in and of itself. They've got a very specific problem that they want to go after. And if you try to market yourself to everybody who has a data related problem, you're not going to be the first choice of anybody. So you might get some work, but they'll have already gone through a bunch of other people who got the sales opportunity before you did. So find that niche and experiment with it for a little bit. Really own that niche. And then if it's still not producing fruit, then see what other niche you can try to go after. But like Charles says, one of the big keys with that is not just picking a niche that you feel most comfortable in. It's finding a niche related to your customer that you want to work with. So for Charles, you said renewable energies, right? That's something that you really enjoy and are passionate about. And so find people that share those sorts of passions that you have, and find customers that you want to work with, more so than just looking at your current skill set alone saying, here are things that I have done. Try to pull in the customer perspective as well.
And so Tyler, when you get to this too, what's really interesting, and I don't know, Andrew, if you've done this too, but I look back every year now or every 6 months, and I find the 2 or 3 customers that were just a pleasure. And I was like, man, what is the persona? What is the characteristic of those people? How do I get more like that? Because my life is better because I met those people, and I hope I made their lives better because I solved their problems. And I want more people like that, right? And it's helped me find better leads too, because there's certain, now I know, okay, these are the bad ones, and we just didn't get along because of this, maybe communication style or something. And then you can really weed out and find people that you work well with, and then it's a service to the other people too, because it's like, my style is not going to work with you, so let's not do business. But these people, wow, let's connect more, and I can add more value and impact to these people. So
sometimes the higher paying client is the client you do not want to do the work with, because they make your life not worth the money. Yeah. Or your at least perception of the time spent, it makes it a drag to work on. And yeah. I don't know. I went independent because I wanted to enjoy more of my time.
Yeah. Yep. So no, this is great advice. So we're gonna end it here, guys, for this week. But I've got a bunch of posted notes here written down for next week's show. So hang on real quick, audience members. Daryl, thank you so much. And just your other question: what channels do you recommend for watching, following? I watch Curbal. I watch Avi Singh, and Microsoft Power BI has a channel. And maybe Andrew and Tyler maybe end with one channel that you watch or you really enjoy.
I really like Data with Danny Ma. And then one more, Cassie Kozakov from Google.
Oh, cool. All right. And Andrew, is there a YouTube or a blog post or blog that?
Yeah, I don't do much on YouTube. Like I said, I focus primarily on LinkedIn. I've been expanding into Twitter. And so the things I watch are mostly in the marketing side. So my go-to on both LinkedIn and Twitter is Jason Vana, which maybe we should see if we can get him on to talk about some of the stuff Daryl was asking about.
Yeah, that would be good.
Let's do that. That's pretty cool.
And I can ask, your point is John Nemo, and Avi Singh actually does a lot of mindset and sales and strategy and stuff too. So he's been on my show once, so maybe I can get him back on one more time. So everybody,
we have 2 sales gurus on here.
Yeah, some salespeople. And then you guys hang on for a quick minute. We'll do a wrap up. So thanks everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks, guys.